Ladies and gentlemen, damage and functionality testing solar grenades in PvP was as tedious as I figured it would be. But I have collected all the data for you, so hopefully you can put this information to good use. Just a few testing notes and parameters to highlight before we hop into things. The main focus of my testing was raw damage output, but functionality and utility will also be discussed. Scorch. All solar grenades will scorch targets. When applicable, I did factor in a full scorch cycle into the maximum damage output, but the damage from the scorch cannot outright down an enemy target. Keep that in mind. Scorch stacks in PvP plummet quickly once applied. They hold steady for about a second and a half and then zip down to zero. So if you're looking for that rather rare PvP ignition, you gotta find a way to get more stacks on the target fast. Grenades can be a shade inconsistent, even more so when scorch damage and number rounding are involved. Inevitably, there is going to be some margin of error in this testing. In these tests, I did gather the base numbers and the numbers with the Ember of Ashes fragment equipped. This is going to up the scorch stacks applied by 50% in most cases, and up the scorch damage just a little bit. These sets of numbers will be applicable for all classes. I also tested with the Touch of Flame aspect for the Warlocks as well, so that data will be included here also. And I'm not going to be addressing any class-specific exotics, we're just looking at the grenades themselves. If you have any questions, drop them down in the comments, and hopefully me or one of your fellow Guardians can help clear things up for you. And while you're down there, how about dropping Old Ironworker's video a like? It would be very much appreciated. But into our first grenade with the old Hunter staple, the Tripmine. It's a directional based grenade that sticks to hard surfaces and detonates when a target enters its proximity. If you do directly impact a target, which is not exactly recommended, you will see 3 points of impact damage and then 141 points of damage from the blast itself. And this is basically guaranteed damage. If a player trips the grenade and gets hit by the blast, they're going to take full damage, except on the very outer edges of its reach. The grenade's going to apply 40 scorch stacks and you'll see 4 scorch ticks rolling off, totaling out to 21 points of damage. All said and done, that's 165 points of damage, a huge chunk of the enemy's health bar. A few other functionality notes. Once stuck, the Tripmine will lay in wait for up to 10 seconds, provided it's not destroyed. The trigger range is conical shaped, expanding out from the point of the grenade. The max diameter appears to be about 5 meters, with its overall reach stretching out to 9 meters. At roughly 10 meters here, you can see that Mrs. Ironworker does not trigger the grenade, but when the grenade does self-detonate, she does take a little bit of damage from that blast. For the throw distance test, I'm just sticking with the same procedure that I ran in my PvP Void Grenade testing. Start 1 meter left of the heavy ammo crate, put the reticle right on the knot of the tree in the distance, throw the grenade, run to the point of impact, turn around, read the distance. In this case, we're looking at 25 meters, which actually held consistent for all but one of the solar grenades. There was a bit more variance when I tested the Void Grenades, but solar grenades seem to be pretty well normalized. But back to the matter at hand. With Ember of Ashes equipped, the total number of scorch ticks that we're going to see moves up to 5, dealing 30 points of damage. The total maximum damage output moves up to 174, with 60 scorch stacks applied. And that high, guaranteed damage does make the Tripmine Grenade a very solid option. It's ideal for placing around corners and doorways, on ceilings, or just in high traffic lanes. They'll knock an unsuspecting Guardian's health right down into the critical range, resulting in an easy cleanup for you or your teammates. Next, the Swarm Grenade. Detonates on impact, releasing 9 Seeker drones that track to targets. This one kinda took me off guard. It's surprisingly powerful, but inconsistent and quirky from a testing standpoint. Each one of those drones is gonna carry 2 damage values with it on impact, 9 and 8, so 17 in total. If all 9 drones land perfectly, that's 153 points of damage. The scorch you're gonna see applied will vary greatly depending on how many of those drones actually make a clean connection. They can collide with each other, they can detonate early, they can miss. And for whatever reason, this grenade seems to be far more effective if a player wanders into the swarm rather than the grenade directly contacting the target. Those seekers start tracking in a more sequential manner rather than all at once, which tends to result in more damage. I'm figuring about 170-ish points of damage is a good best case scenario number for what you can expect to see, but like I said, that can fluctuate greatly. Functionality notes. These drones do have a linger time of approximately 7 seconds once spawned out, and the proximity to begin tracking is roughly 5 meters. For the throw distance test, once again, right in the neighborhood of 25 meters. Looking at things with Ember of Ashes equipped, there were a few instances where it just did an absurd amount of damage. First, look at things from Mrs. Ironworker's perspective when she wanders into that swarm. 90 scorch stacks applied, way more than expected with the fragment. And then watch these scorch ticks start rolling. She is at tier 8 resilience. Because the scorch is continuing to pile up as these seekers do make contact, the scorch protection threshold is met right in the middle of the scorch afterburn. Without it, we would have went over 200 points of damage in this case. And I was able to replicate these results several times. Not every time though. Multi-particle grenades are always just going to be a little less consistent. But I think the real strengths of this grenade are twofold. It's a nice area denial tool, forcing enemies to consider an alternate route if they're placed in hallways or doors, or used as a means to flush enemies out of cover and make them move. And in both cases, given the grenade's potential damage, it does need to be respected. But there's always the chance for the enemy to outrun these seekers. Moving on to the Incendiary Grenade, a grenade that explodes in a fiery burst, heavily scorching targets. This is your grenade of the bunch, bouncing off of hard surfaces and detonating after a short delay. The maximum damage from the grenade blast is 171. It'll apply 60 scorched stacks and will see 5 scorched ticks, totaling out to 29 points of damage. If you do factor in the minimal impact, that's 202 points of damage dealt here. But once again, scorched ticks cannot down an enemy player, so Mrs. Ironworker is left on just a sliver of health. Biggest thing to note as far as functionality here, to get full damage from the blast, the grenade needs to settle right at the target's feet. If it's over a meter away, it's gonna see some reduced damage. Most grenades do hold their max damage a bit further out than that, but the maximum effective radius of the grenade does stretch out to 7 meters. Minimal damage at that point, but the applied scorched stacks and scorched ticks do remain unchanged. Throw distance test, 25 meters yet again. When equipping Ember of Ashes, we're moving up to 90 scorched stacks and 48 points of damage dealt from 8 scorched ticks, moving the total damage output up to 221, which is overkill in terms of damage because of the scorched protection, but because of the larger number of scorched ticks, we are blocking health regen for an extended period. But 90 scorched stacks, if you can pile on a few more from a melee or a scorch applying weapon, you can secure that ignition, dealing 121 points of damage. The Incendiary can be a tough grenade to use though. The damage is more or less ground confined, the grenade could take a weird bounce off of something, and there is a delay on the detonation. All things that do need accounted for, but if you're someone who can get this grenade dialed in, there is a nice payoff. The Thermite Grenade, a grenade that sends forth a burning line of fire. On ground impact, the first wave will fire out immediately, with 3 follow-up waves releasing at about 1.5 second intervals, so 4 in total. If one of these waves directly impacts a target, it can deal a maximum of 125 points of damage, shown in split damage values of 80 and 45. So, 2 direct hits from 2 waves, 250 points of damage, that's lethal. But on non-direct impacts near the edges of the wave, you will see reduced damage. But we are looking at over 50 points of damage leeway, so 2 waves generally does do the trick. Scorch applied will vary with the number of waves that do make contact. In the grand scheme of things though, the variable nature of it is more or less inconsequential. If the enemy gets out of the way after 1 wave, they're just going to take a tickle of scorch. If they hang out for the second wave, they're going to be dead in most cases anyway. Functionality points, I have the total width of the wave coming in at 2 meters, with the overall reach of the wave stretching out to 20 meters, so it does cover a good bit of ground. And this does highlight the damage reduction pretty well, with Mrs. Ironworker being right on the front edge of that wave. Total uptime of the grenade is 4.5 seconds, and the throw distance, you probably guessed it, 25 meters. A solid grenade though, highly lethal, good uptime, can hit multiple targets, has the potential to steer enemy players away from its area of effect, and while the damage is ground confined, it certainly does pack a punch. And with that, moving on to the set of grenades that are also affected by the touch of flame aspect. The Firebolt Grenade, a grenade that releases bolts of solar light, max 3 of them at base. Upon contacting an enemy or hard surface, these bolts will fork out and hit players within its effective radius. In its base form, that's 7 meters. Each bolt will deal 65 points of damage and apply 20 scorched stacks, resulting in 3 scorched ticks, totaling out to 14 points of damage. That's 81 in total if you are factoring in the minimal impact. But if there are no targets in this grenade's effective search radius, it just fizzles out. The throw distance on the Firebolt Grenade is the odd one of the batch. I have it coming in at 22 meters, 3 meters shy of all of the other solar grenades. So it does have a slightly heavier feel. With Ember of Ashes, scorched stacks move up to 30, but only result in 1 more point of damage from the same 3 scorched ticks. If you're a warlock using the touch of flame aspect, the potential enemies affected by the grenade moves up to 4, but it also increases the grenade's effective search radius. The aspect gives it the ability to reach out to 12 meters, which is a pretty substantial improvement in that respect. And no new revelations to report on if you're running Ember of Ashes and Touch of Flame at the same time. So the Firebolt's basically an instant grenade that's dealing comparably minimal damage. Its strength is its consistency though. That 65 points of damage is guaranteed if a bolt forks out and hits a target, so you always know what you're getting. You still have a lot of work to do to finish off the kill, but it does give you the opportunity to make a calculated assessment. Next up, the Fusion Grenade, an explosive grenade that attaches to targets, or anything that it contacts for that matter. When stuck on a target, you'll see 2 points of impact damage, 131 from the blast, 40 scorched stacks applied, and 4 scorched ticks, totaling out to 21 points of damage. Grand total, 154 points of damage. And this grenade does have friendly target tracking, so slightly off-target throws will bend to hit their mark. Versus secondary targets, or with a grenade that misses its mark, diffusion will still deal max damage from up to 2 meters away. The maximum effective blast radius comes in at 7 meters, and on a throw distance test, 25 meters. With Ember of Ashes equipped, we're going to move our Scorch stacks up to 60 and see 5 Scorch ticks dealing 30 points of damage. New max total, 163. If using the Touch of Flame aspect, you'll get a second explosion from the grenade, dealing 51 points of damage. But that secondary explosion does not apply any additional Scorch stacks, still at a base 40. But that's a total of 182 points of damage just from the blasts themselves. 205 if you're rolling the Impact and the Scorch, which does hit the Scorch protection wall. With Ember of Ashes and Touch of Flame, a single grenade can yield 214 points of damage, which really isn't helping out a whole lot versus a single target with that Scorch protection in place. This is a pretty handy grenade in 1v1 engagements though. Even the grenade in its base form, if you stick it on an enemy, they're critical. And the aforementioned grenade tracking does help out a great deal, leading to easy cleanups in most cases. The grenade may not be ideal when dealing with groups of enemies, and there is a slight delay before the blast, so watch out for that, but it's very effective in helping take down the target that's right in front of you. Last up, the Solar Grenade creates a flare of solar light that damages and scorches enemies trapped inside. The only true damage over time based grenade of the subclass. If you nail a target directly with the Solar Grenade, 2 points of impact damage and 21 points of blast damage. Shortly after, the damage over time kicks in at 26 points of damage per tick. The Scorch damage here again is going to be variable, since 20 stacks are applied on impact and 1 second in the damage field tacks on 14. It just really depends on how the grenade lands and how long the target is taking damage from it. I figured the best way to demonstrate what it's capable of was just to clock the time to kill, which at base I have coming in at 2.79 seconds, with the total duration coming in at 4.5. With Ember of Ashes equipped, we do apply additional stacks, but no outright ignition before Mrs. Ironworker goes down to the damage. Maybe more importantly, the slight Scorch damage increase did not improve the time to kill. I still had it coming in at 2.79 seconds. If we're making use of Touch of Flame though, the grenade's full duration from the moment of impact is extended to 6.5 seconds. It also adds lava blobs, 10 in total over the full grenade cycle. Each one that contacts a target, and this does appear to be pass-through damage, hits for a healthy 51. But there is no Scorch or Scorch stacks directly tied to the lava blobs. The direction at which they launch out does appear to be pretty random, but they can stretch to 8 meters. And the time to kill will be improved on, but it's dependent on how many lava blobs actually contact the enemy. Over the course of several tests, I saw as quick as 2.09 seconds or as slow as 2.21. Both are a nice improvement from base though. If we pile in Ember of Ashes on top of that, I couldn't see any tangible difference in the kill speed. Time to kills held pretty consistent with or without the fragment equipped. But in general, this is a nice multi-purpose grenade. It can outright secure kills, does deal damage to multiple guardians. With its uptime, you can use it for area denial or clearing enemy targets off a capture point, and it's non-destructible. I mean, it's a solid versatile grenade for PvP. Healing Grenade, not going to cover it in this one. I went over the fine points of it in the PvE grenade testing, and nothing new to report on here. Do check out that video if you are interested though. So that's all I got for you here. Arc Grenades and PvP video. Inbound soon, hopefully. Subscribe to the channel if you want to be front and center when that one releases. But with all that being said, I hope the information in the video was useful. You guys are awesome, and I will catch you on the next one.